All right, parents, this is one of the fancier words you'll hear us use in our office, and it applies to your kiddo if your kiddo is dealing with multiple health issues. Maybe they're anxious and constipated. Maybe they have sensory issues and they're sick and congested and runny nose all the time. You see, this fancy word, dysautonomia, is a word that you may not have heard from your traditional doctor or your pediatrician. One of the reasons is they are often looking for the concern to try to find the diagnosis in your child by one of two ways. They might run some blood tests and look through the lab side of things, maybe a stool sample, and do their laboratory analysis to look for an imbalance. Or they're going to do imaging, an x-ray, a CT, an MRI, and odds are if you're watching this video, those things may have come up negative, meaning they haven't found anything. Or maybe you're watching this because you're getting tired to taking your kiddo from specialist to specialist. You've got the neurologist and the GI doc and the immunologist looking for allergies and autoimmune, and maybe you've got your ortho doc that's checking their movements and their x-rays, and you're saying, I know there's these different things going on, but there's part of your intuition wondering, is there a commonality amongst it all? And that's what we're going to talk about today. Because this term, dysautonomia, is one of the things that we see in our office more often than not in a kiddo who's been struggling with multiple things and hasn't really got to the root of the problem. So we're going to talk about what it is, what causes it, how to actually measure and find it. I'll show you an example here. This was an 8-year-old girl that we worked with. And most importantly, how you can help it. Because I know as a parent, you are wanting the best for your child. And if you're not finding an answer, odds are you're becoming frustrated. Maybe you're becoming run down because they're not sleeping at night, so then you don't sleep at night. Or maybe there's another sick day, another missed day of school, which means another missed day of work for you. Or maybe you just feel the stress and the emotional tension in your kiddo and you want to help them out. So here's what we're looking at. Dysautonomia is a fancy word, and I want to break it down for you very simply. So if we look at this, we see the auto in it, which basically, when I think of that, I think of automatic. One of the keys is that your brain and your kiddo's brain, their nervous system, is running most of the things in their body automatically. They should be on autopilot. When you've got a baby and they nurse or drink a bottle, you don't have to tell them how to digest that food. If your kiddo gets a bug, a virus, or a bacteria, you don't have to teach their immune system what to do about it. You don't have to teach them how to roll and how to crawl and how to walk. Their brain is set up to do these things on its own. So this dysautonomia term basically means that automatic part of the nervous system is getting shifted out of balance. The main way that happens is when the nervous system gets stuck in this chronic state of fight or flight. You've probably heard that term before. It means that stress response. It's also known as the sympathetic response in the nervous system. When the nervous system goes into the chronic state of fight or flight, it's almost like that gas pedal is always going. And what it does then is it shifts it away from the brake pedal, which slows things down. It's the rest and digest and the healing response. That side, it's called the parasympathetic side, and it's activated by a nerve you may have heard of, especially if you've been studying this for a while now, called the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve activates that brake pedal to bring things down, to calm the brain, to help organize the brain, to activate the gut, digestion, to activate sleep at night, to help with mood, to help with focus and learning, and all the things we want our kid to do. The challenge is, when these two things are happening, they're kind of like driving your car. Either your foot's on the gas or your foot's on the brake, but it's not on both at once. If your kiddo's stuck in this chronic state of fight or flight, it's like their foot is always on the gas pedal. And over time, it starts to lead to an imbalance in this this automatic part of their nervous system. So when it's stuck in chronic fight or flight, that's what we see causing this imbalance, this dysautonomia. How that can show up now, if we go to the very beginning here, gut and digestion, maybe you noticed it back when your baby was an infant and they were colicky. Maybe they had a lot of reflux. Maybe they were constipated. Maybe your toddler, your elementary school kiddo is still constipated. And the interesting thing that we see is whether it's a 3-year-old with sensory issues, a 7-year-old with ADHD, maybe you've got a 9-year-old, a middle schooler dealing with anxiety or depression. Guess what? A lot of times we see they have a gut issue as well. You've most likely heard of the gut-brain connection. And the thing is, the brain, this vagus nerve, especially from the brainstem here, is actually one of the first things that does get the gut online. So yes, if there is inflammation in the gut, it can feed back and cause inflammation in the brain. But most importantly, we do want to make sure there's good stimulation, good connection from the brain down to the body. And if your kiddo's stuck in chronic fight or flight, it's going to shift their gut and digestion out of balance. Gut and digestion actually links up very closely now, especially when we go into the immune response. And the reason this is that gut and digestion is designed to bring things in, move it down, and keep it moving down and out. If it's stuck, if it's stagnant, it doesn't do that. Very similar to your kiddo's immune system. If a bug comes in, maybe it's breathed in, maybe it's in their eyes, their ears, our bodies are designed to move it down and out. We cough it up, maybe our ears need to run, the eustachian tubes need to drain into the neck and the throat, and our nose runs, and ultimately we want things to move down and out. If there's congestion in our gut, we often see congestion in the immune system. So you might have a kiddo that has had chronic ear infections because that fluid's building up and it's stagnant. Maybe your kiddo gets cold after cold after cold, or they get a cold and it lasts 6 weeks because that congestion just sits there. Sinus infections, that can even then lead into things like allergies because of that congestion there. So if your kiddo's stuck in that chronic fight-flight state, it's going to prevent the natural healing from happening. Chronic stress affects our respiratory system and breathing because we start to breathe up with these muscles up here instead of down into our belly. And of course, the respiratory and immune system with asthma and allergies are so closely linked together. And again, we see that most commonly when the nervous system is stuck in an imbalanced state. Moving on to the mental and emotional side. We all know when we're feeling stressed, we might have a little shorter temper. If we're feeling chronically stressed, our brain isn't going to be as focused. So a kiddo with ADHD, if their gas pedal's stuck on, they're going to want to jump from one thing to the next because that's actually how our bodies are built. If we go into fight flight, if a tiger jumps out from us, we're designed to say, oh, there's a threat. Well, let me see what else is going on, to be very aware, but also like constantly moving because we have this surge of adrenaline and cortisol and these stress hormones and our body wants to do something with them. So chronic fight flight means chronic stress response for the brain. So here we see ADHD, we see anxiety. When we get a little bit older, maybe the kiddo you're caretaking for is starting to get burnt out. So now they're starting to become depressed and lethargic, worn down. They don't want to engage in life. ODD, OCD, those things can all fall under this mental and emotional category. And then the last one is if our nervous system is stuck in stress mode. As I mentioned, maybe you're breathing higher so you feel tension in the neck and the shoulders, and up top here, maybe you see your kiddo's posture starting to hunch over and they feel wound up and tight and protective instead of relaxed and open. That's this motor system. It's the muscle system. And when we shift into fight flight, it shifts how our muscles are used in our body, and it creates more tension. Maybe your kiddo's on the other side and they're doing OT or PT because you're told they have low tone. Oftentimes with a kiddo with low tone, what we actually see is, yes, they have low tone in their arms, in their legs, and maybe that's preventing their milestones or affecting their handwriting or their ability to button their shirt. While we do see low tone there or maybe in their core, we actually see high tone then somewhere else in their body, often along their neural spinal system, because something off here can create tension in the core and then make the limbs become weak. So if you're dealing with more of these things for your kiddo, and maybe they are doing OT and PT and speech, and maybe they're seeing their therapist or their psychologist, They're seeing the immunologist, the asthma doc, the allergy doc. They're going to their GI doc, and you're saying, I'm tired. That's too many appointments, and it doesn't feel like everyone's on the same page. If you want to potentially see if something is going on that is further upstream with your kiddo, here's where I encourage you to start to look, is this idea of dysautonomia. Because if that nervous system's stuck in fight or flight, it's going to cause a whole multitude of factors. The most common thing that we see in our office that's causing this, and what we measure for, is this stress along the neurospinal system. The spine and the nervous system are intricately connected and relate to each other. So this scan is a thermal scan. It measures temperature at each of the nerve levels along the spine. There was, if you'd like a copy, years ago, this is a Johns Hopkins study, and basically it talks about how this thermal scan measures for this actual term, dysautonomia. And what we see is if there's an imbalance, it shows up as green, blue, or red. And it not only tells us if there is an imbalance, but where it is, and then of course how severe or how mild it might be. This was an 8-year-old girl who had a lot of sensory issues, and as a result, clothes were a big deal for her. She'd take an hour to get dressed in the morning because she hated putting her clothes on. The other big thing for her was a nervous stomach. She dealt with anxiety, and if she was worried about school that day, she might spend the whole morning throwing up. And of course she had to miss school, and parents, of course, didn't like to see their poor little daughter having to throw up because of that nervousness that built up in her body. So what we see on her scans, this whole section right through here actually has a lot to do with the stomach and the digestion. Up top here, we have nerves that come from the brainstem, which is going to affect that vagus nerve to calm the body. Once we found what was going on, we started adjusting her. One of the first things parents noticed is she just felt calmer overall. After several weeks, suddenly an hour to get dressed in the morning went down to half an hour. A couple months later, it was down to 10, 15 minutes. And then a few months into care, we were looking back and mom said, the last couple months, she hasn't missed any school because of that nervous stomach and that throwing up in the morning. When we did her follow-up scan, and I'm just checking the date, so this was 2.5 months later, this follow-up, we went from this much stress in her nervous system, this much dysautonomia, down to this much. Still a little bit of work to do, but we certainly know we're on the right track. So that measurement is allowing us to give you a snapshot into your kiddo's body. And what we see over and over again is that when kiddos get adjusted, probably the first thing we see is better sleep. The second thing we see is they start to digest their food better. They start to have better, more consistent bowel movements. As things start to build up, we see over and over again families say, that was the best winter we've gone through in a really long time. Either we got sick way less, or when we did get sick, we saw our kiddo clear it out way more quickly. And with that then, as we're shifting from stress mode and allowing that brake pedal to start to come online, now their nervous system, because it's feeling calmer, starts to affect their mental health as well. Parents report better focus, more attention, and overall less stress, like that little girl that I just shared. So if this is something that resonates with you, I encourage you to start to look more. And as I said, dysautonomia, if you talk to your pediatrician about it, they might not have a whole lot to say, but it's something that we love to educate parents about in our office. We have a separate video I did specifically on the vagus nerve if you want to dive more into that nerve and how that affects the balance of stress and rest and digest. And read through our blogs, check out our other stories and testimonials. And if you do have specific questions, shoot us an email, shoot us a message, make a comment, and we are here to help you. I'll see you soon.